Welcome back to what is now our final session of Mission Possible. And I'm delighted to introduce our speakers. So we will be joined by Susanne Given, who is the chair of Made.com, and she'll be in conversation with Rod Banner, the CEO of 3LA. I'm really looking forward to hearing both of your views on leadership to close the event. Over to you both.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, everybody.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Rod?
I can hear you, Susanne.
Then we're going to assume that we're on. Thank you for being here, everybody, and welcome to Rod Banner, who is a phenomenon in his own right. Through his consulting firm, 3LA.com, he's created phenomenal team of luminaries to optimize proposition architecture, brand and business design, and marketing performance. He's founded and then exited multiple businesses, and he's mentored countless tech industry luminaries. He's also been acknowledged as part of the Tech City Insider 100 list, the Fresh Business Thinking Power 100, the Maserati 100, the Smith & Williamson Power 100, and the GQ's list of the 100 most connected men in Britain, not to forget. He is indeed a phenomenon in his own right. Now, Rod, I know you wanted to play a video before we got into this conversation. Do you want to just share with the audience what the video was all about?
Yes, of course. Well, firstly, can I just apologize for that long list of sort of hyperbole encrusted nuggets. I mean, to be honest, as I grow older, I become far more awkward about trophying anything that I've managed to achieve. And I think as I grow older, I feel I know much less than I thought I did. But people fortunately still pay me for what little knowledge I have. And in this instance, I'm wading in here to a really challenging topic. And I would like firstly to just empathize with the audience that these are not things any of us trained for. We're facing not just the pandemic, but the economic meltdown and so forth. And the film I was going to show, and I'm very happy to put a link in later, was a film made by the Robert Kennedy Institute, which is essentially established by his wife to promote peace in our time. And this is a video that Bobby Kennedy, he made a speech shortly before he was gunned down that talks about the world that he was facing, which is 50 years ago. Men had just been to the moon, and there was a lot of hype about the space flight, the Apollo astronauts. And it's kind of ironic that 50 years hence, we're looking at SpaceX, who've pretty much done the same kind of thing, certainly embarked on similar exercise. At the same time, there was race riots going on across America. There was political upheavals, a huge amount of political distrust and disharmony was everywhere. And I saw this film some time ago, and it's haunted me ever since, because the thread that runs through it is about people not standing aside in the face of such difficulty. Now, commitment is something that every leader of a business knows a lot about. You don't start a business lightly. You wade in fully and completely. You are stuck with it, to be honest. When people say, I'm thinking about starting a business, I know they haven't started it, because once you're there, the chances of you being able to escape, even if it's a success, is very slight. You're going to be there for some time. If it's successful, you're going to be there because you're addicted to it. And if it's not successful, you're going to be stuck there because shareholders and your employees are holding your feet to the fire. So like our sort of encounter with COVID-19, business is fully committed. And I don't know about you, but I look back on political leaders of the past, possibly through rose-colored spectacles, but I look at integrity. as a key indicator of greatness. If you slice somebody open, what they stand for is true. What they mean is exactly what they say. There's no shadows, no doubt, no twisting of the words to mean one thing or open yourself up to appeal to multiple audiences. And I think that this film about choosing not to stand aside is so important in the whole dynamics of the role of leader. You are there, but not because you have a big ego or not because you want to become enriched financially. It's a great privilege to be a leader. And one could say, possibly you won't in today's environment, but one and some people could say challenges are what makes leading interesting. So remember that I think good leadership isn't about leading. It's about having people follow you. You can't lead unless people are there behind you, and ideally not carrying a knife, but there because they want to be there.
But Rod,
So,
it's a little bit, I guess, in the area where your great hero, Peter Drucker, set out the differentiation between management and leadership, whereas management is doing all the right things, but leadership is doing the right things.
yes.
And I'm guessing that's really what you're describing here. Doing the right thing takes real integrity and it takes real commitment.
It's about truths. I love the people. It's fair to say I've led a few big teams, but because I'm largely consultant, I get the chance to work with leaders of much bigger teams than I have personally led, and I see the challenges they have from all sides. But I think what continues to inspire me is when we talk about doing the right things, it almost feels like you're doing good as well as running a business. You're looking after everybody, your customers, your staff from the highest to the lowest, and your shareholders. And you're making the constant dance of prioritizing which one needs the most love at which time. And you're equally explaining clearly why one party might not be particularly happy about what you're doing right now, but you're doing it for the right reasons.
And you know, that's hard enough. That's a hard enough dance to carry out when the world is normal. But at this time of COVID-19, how do you do that? Because reading people across the room has never been more difficult. And really doing the right thing and getting to the point of view of what the right thing is related to being connected with people, being in the same room, sensing the sentiment, knowing the background issues because you pick them up around the coffee machine, watching people's involuntary reaction when they don't think you're watching them, all of those things. That's how you figure out what the right thing is, because it's not about KPIs, which is the conversation we had around this topic too. So how do you do that during a time of social distancing and working from home? It's hard, isn't it?
Yes, and Susanne, it makes me very happy that I did in my preamble highlight the fact that no one has actually come up against this level of complexity in leadership in the past. I don't believe so. So in some cases, I can't give you a clear answer. But what I can say is that I believe that I refer quite often to back channels in management. So if you think about hierarchical management structure where one person reports to another and reports to another, then you tend only to get the back channel conversations around the coffee machine because there's no formalized way of doing it. And I think great leaders are the very people who remember not only who all their non-reports, but who their employees are. They also have this insane gift to remember who those people's partners are and their pets and the pressures they may be wrestling with at home. And of course, in these circumstances where you may have elderly parents or you may have young children who would otherwise be at school, competing for your attention, these challenges are immense. And I think that any leader worth their salt is sufficiently wise to be cognizant of these challenges and compassionate about them. But I think the random thing in the preamble to this call, Susanne and I talked a little bit about this. I don't know how many of the people on this session have been on Zoom calls for most of the week, or at least
a large percentage.
most of the lockdown. And I wanted to speak to a friend of mine who's also a work colleague and mentioned this in a message, and his response was, "Okay, sure, 3:30 Zoom ? And I said, no, let's pick up the phone and speak to each other. And I think the slightly less formal process and sometimes not being visible. Sometimes being visible is great. Sometimes just not being visible is good. I think the back channel, the calls at unpredictable times are really important. But ultimately, what is important, I think, is making sure that people remain engaged in the business at large. You see how inside an organization people are engaged because of their productivity. They have things to do and they do it. But engagement is more than what people deliver. Engagement is around being part of the dream. So as a leader, you have a vision, you have the idea of what you're going to change in the world and how you're going to benefit customers. And you may have presented that when you hired these people, but right now they've probably forgotten. And you may not know if they're waking up and thinking about you, your business, the things that you're worried shitless about. And you could obviously connect with them and ask them that kind of question directly. I find it easier if you can ask them questions that involve them in the answers. So if your big vision is to create something massive, they're not, as an individual, going to be able to deliver something massive. But if you take that into fractals, into small elements, each of which people can participate in, and maybe ask them a direct question: what should I do? What should we do? What can you do to help us along this particular road, or think of a road that's better? The people involved feel much more part of it, and they respect that their opinion counts.
And I think in a way, going back to earlier comments around the phone call, the unexpected nature of an unscheduled call can be enormously impactful right now when people are sitting in front of their screens and navigating, how do I get across that I have achieved some greatness today? Getting that unexpected call is very powerful right now in this very sort of context of being quite isolated. Maybe there's there's a much higher currency against making that reaching out unprompted just to touch somebody and tell them they're doing a great job, to keep them very motivated, to your point. When did you last phone somebody and impact them in this most positive of ways?
Well, I suppose that's a very good question. I do make random calls to people, and quite a lot of them are to do with my own personal mental health, just to prove that we're all human and we can have unstructured calls that benefit both parties. But I suppose the one that was most impactful was a call I made to a colleague recently who has been locked down in the country in a quite solitary space. And we had a very interesting conversation around how this particular lady was feeling, and equally the challenges which she was wrestling with. And you know, when you've made some kind of impact, I think when you don't get to speak very much, but the other party is grateful that you have called them. I think Nick Taylor probably be able to give you a much better explanation as to why that works. But I've long since recognized that some of the most effective calls I've ever made are just dialing and going, yes, or oh, or just responding with a degree of heartfelt kindness to the situation that people are presenting.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Great example. Talking about great leadership within an organization during COVID is one part of the equation, and how you go about it, and to your point, keep people engaged and motivated. But as a leader, as a leader who wants to demonstrate a great integrity and carry the flagpole, if you like, for the company, how do you stay connected within your ecosystem? Because that's also really critical. You know, normally this happens through external meetings, events, presentations, the coffee before and after an event. What platforms do you see as being useful to maintain a meaningful presence within your particular ecosystem at this point in time, Rod?
Gosh, I suppose I have been possibly more engaged with the flurry of content that seems to have popped up on LinkedIn. I think that there was always a marketing constant in social media, the 1-9-90 rule, where 1% of people created content, 9% of people commented on it, and 90% just consumed that content. And I was trying to do a little piece of research the other day to see if that fundamental ratio has changed. And I can only say this was a very small sample. It didn't seem that it had. However, the number of conversations has exploded, and the amount of specificity around those conversations. So in other words, the verticalization of focus of conversations seems to be much more interesting. So there's nothing you cannot find to amuse, stimulate, and inform you in the context of LinkedIn. And I suppose that has been really important recently in order to expand and extend my community. Email, I have to be honest, is still the most important vehicle. And there was a piece of marketing research which came out only, I think the day before yesterday, that established in North America, email was the way that people will still choose to communicate. It's structured and formulated. But I think group emails that have real meaning and purpose, as opposed to just decluttering your inbox by sending stuff to other people, I believe we are all benefiting from a discipline learned from WhatsApp groups, and the idea of the group chat meaning something where everyone participates in.
And Rod, one of the individuals listening in have also made a comment that Twitter is a great platform to engage with a much broader audience, if you like, to share thoughts and to gain hopefully some positive insights. How do you use Twitter to formulate views for you within the different contexts that you operate?
Susanne, the questions are so beautifully worded. Do I use Twitter? Yes. Do I post on Twitter? Not really anymore. I found it was there was a lot of vitriolic content and painful content that some people can be bothered with. And if you're a celebrity, which I clearly not, then there's good trade-offs to wading into the dark waters of Twitter. I find myself withdrawing increasingly from Facebook, Twitter, and even to some extent from Instagram for those reasons more recently. However, the one thing that Twitter is brilliant for is search. And I feel as Google becomes increasingly driven by marketing incentives, Twitter has always been pretty bad at managing advertising. So it is a cooperative community to find great content that otherwise is hardly ever available to you. And I don't know whether it's just my experience, but I find it signposts some of the most meaningful or useful content I ever discover. So as a discovery engine, yes. As a community, probably not.
A little harder. I just want to come back to something you touched on earlier. We're sort of getting close to the back end of this. You talked about the difference between command and control type of organizations and leadership, and perhaps leadership which is much more engaging and empowering. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but it is my view that we come out of a 30-40-year era where command and control really was the method by which large businesses were built, and that they potentially are crumbling now because that's just not how the world works any longer. And great businesses today are built on great communication, authentic leadership, all of the attributes that you've outlined during this session. Do you see COVID as being a real tool that will drive differentiation in performance between the old world of command and control and a new world that perhaps is forced to push harder into a different way of managing teams and businesses?
Funny enough, I was on a panel the other day, and that was the question that we were all wrestling with. And so, having gone through that thought process, I believe it to be true. I think various changes have taken place through the pandemic, and I think also the societal pain associated with Black Lives Matter that has kind of come to the surface. It made us question, what the hell are we doing? What is the purpose, particularly of business? And I'm fortunate. I have two young sons wrestling with what they want to do with their lives. And I mean, everyone wants to make enough money to live comfortably, but I think their whole generation is paying a lot of attention to working for businesses with purpose, with environmental credentials and societal credentials too. And this whole Tom's wonderful Mission Possible movement, it's really, I think, the dawn of a new era where shareholders definitely need to benefit from a business if they've invested in it, but maybe those investments don't come true purely from monetary gain. they might look at those investments in a more of a philanthropic fashion. So other metrics might be considered rather than profits, perhaps measuring a change in climate change. I've long been an advocate for using the tech sector and the massive wealth and innovatory skills that they have to focus less on irritating me with advertising every waking moment of my life, and instead looking at what they could do to help create more human joy and understand what it consists of. But through this pandemic, I think we found making sourdough bread or growing things in gardens or doing very simple things has been more important to us than necessarily winning another gong.
You've sort of just answered my last question, because I was going to ask you, as the founder of Joy Tech, what do you do to motivate yourself and your team? Again, a question from a person in the audience. What do you do as the founder of Joy Tech, who understands how powerful the sense of joy can be in allowing people to have a sense of purpose in life? What do you do to motivate yourself and or your team, apart from growing vegetables, clearly?
Well, there are lots of things that I've learned. I mean, Joy Tech hasn't really, if anything, the joytech.org, by the way, joytech.org community has done something for me in that I have learned a great deal about how my personal joy can be enhanced. I've recognized the importance of kindness. Kindness is a natural phenomenon that benefits the person who is kind much more than they might think. And so I try my best to be kind. I try my best to be grateful for the masses of good fortune that I have had and the wonderful friends that I am privileged to have too. One thing that I gave up, which some people I still find that they may be perplexed by, is I stopped drinking alcohol after having read the most phenomenal study commissioned by by Harvard University way back. I think it was in the 20s. They studied a collection of men and their lives and drew a staggering correlation between alcohol consumption and unhappiness. So much as I love drinking rather fine red wine, I've sacrificed that in the pursuit of joy. And to be honest, I find the result to be very agreeable. So that's one thing.
Very nice.
Yeah. And I think also with regard to business, you know, it's such an honor to be in a position of leadership or to be in a position where people are interested in listening to you. Then by all means, feel free to celebrate that every day, but also have fun with it. I mean, the leaders that I love have a sense of humor, and Britain, where I'm speaking from, is particularly good at black humor. By that, I'm not talking about the color of people's skin, but just the kind of humor that I like to hope everyone understands. We are in the midst of people dying around us, but there is still things that are amusing that people find connecting back to that. And our political leadership and how it struggles, how it succeeds or fails, they're all fun things to enjoy and learn from. So
And
remember.
Very powerful at this moment in time where we are trying to keep everybody's spirits high whilst we continue to live to some degree in a diminished way when it comes to our social and professional engagement. Rod, I think that's probably will take us on to picking up some questions from the people who are on the call. And I've got a couple here. one from Bernie, which is marketing and investment budgets are at zero, or certainly significantly repressed. And how would you encourage a professional to come on board in this current environment?
On board, I'd love to have a little bit clarification from Bernie as to.
Yeah, I think that's probably in the context of how do you actually attract people to your business at this point in time, and how do you embed them, I guess, would be a follow-on question to that, because that's hard right now.
Yeah, it's terribly hard. Well, obviously, I would go back to the kind of audiences that you're trying to reach out to. If you're trying to reach out to people who you want to have join your business through marketing platforms, and those marketing platforms are the ones that you're referring to, or you don't have the marketing budget to reach out to them, then I go back to my words about LinkedIn and building your own network and reaching out to people who may know others. Ultimately, content, something I'm particularly keen on. It seems to be the way that advertising has changed from just irritating people into doing something, but then managing to persuade them through incentives or through informing people. Writing great content around what it is that you're trying to achieve, what your business is trying to achieve, and helping others to engage in the direction of travel, I would suspect might be the answer. With regard to marketing budgets, if you are a marketing platform or if you are a marketing automation company, of which I've had the good fortune to work with a few, this is tough. This is very tough. And funny enough, in the lockdown, I've been translating some old tapes I found onto digitizing them. I found a speech I gave back in 2000 when the dot-com meltdown happened, and everyone was wrestling with the same thing. Advertisers were shutting everything off, and ad budgets were axed. And there's some quite interesting content, but essentially everyone's in the same boat. Remember that. So they're not doing it either. Be as active as you can. Tell as many stories as you can. Spend what little money you've got, because if you get market share in a marketplace which is shrinking, the chances are you'll keep it when it starts returning to growth.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you now probably the last question. It's from Stuart Beaver, who loves your description of engagement and involving others, encouraging participation and creating ownership. In your experience, Rod, how do you best encourage leaders to invest in this when they actually believe they know the answer and they want to move fast to the end position effectively? How do you get leaders to slow down and really engage with this topic?
Do you know, that's a really great question, and it's one that's very important. But I would suggest you could obviously slap them about a bit and tell them that they have to involve people. Or you could just simply say this: if you've got the answers, then the answers will hold up to scrutiny. And you still have to communicate the answers to your entire team. So why not lead a conversation around the problem and encourage people to find the answer that you know is right? At that point, you don't have to tell people what to do. They're telling you what to do, and you're engaging in followership rather than leadership.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Rod. I think we are at the end of the session, and I wish you a good afternoon in your beautiful garden. And I hear the weather's wonderful back in the UK. Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for joining us this afternoon.